What's up, Indy? I'm Ray Steele. Thank you for watching my YouTube channel. Hope you like this video, and please hit subscribe and the notifications button so you don't miss the new stuff. And leave a comment too, good or bad, I'll respond. Thanks. What's up, Indy? The Insiders are back, and we're going to talk a lot of polling this week. And I know we haven't been able to trust the polls in seemingly a long time, and we'll get into that and whether that means anything with some of the numbers that my friend Abdul Hakim Shabazz, who in addition to all of his other titles, now apparently will put interview coach in his bio, according to the Twitter critics. We'll explain that in a second. Abdul is with IndyPolitics.org, of course, and our other insiders, Democrat Arielle Brandy and Republican Allie Bartlett, joining us today. Let's dig into the polls. Now, the poll that you released in the Indiana Secretary of State's race, Abdul, that survey was taken before the news that we first talked about exactly 1 week ago, the sexual misconduct allegations against Republican candidate Diego Morales. But even before then, your poll of 600 likely voters, or the poll conducted by ARW Strategies for IndyPolitics.org, showed that Mr. Morales was in trouble.
Yes. Basically, the poll had a 4-point difference between Destiny Wells, excuse me, and Diego Morales. I want to say it was like 37, 30, 34, 33, somewhere in that range. Jeff Moore was about 7% as well. What was interesting in those numbers were that out of the undecideds, which is what we're looking at, nearly a third of Republicans were still undecided as to whether they were going to vote for Diego Morales. And that being about 30 days out before an election, just a couple weeks before early voting, is not a good sign for Mr. Morales. Now, why those Republicans are undecided could be a number of different reasons. And please note, all this was before we broke the story about the sexual misconduct allegation against Diego Morales. It could have been the way he got nominated at the convention, his job at the Secretary of State's office, the car, the military record, you name it. And so Diego's really got to get that base up if he wants to have a chance, a puncher's chance at winning this upcoming election.
Allie, Republicans have been divided on Mr. Morales, at least in part, since the convention, really since before the convention, because this goes back years when Mr. Morales was running for other offices. We know about his work history in the Secretary of State's office, being fired by then Secretary of State Todd Rokita, his work with Mike Pence. It's been a trouble spot potentially for Republicans this entire time. And now, of course, you have the allegations on top of everything else.
Yeah, I can't deny that Diego is not the strongest candidate that we have had in the last several years. I think the key here to seeing where the outcome of this race is going to go is exactly what Abdul said. It's that undecided faction of the Republican Party. I would like to, think that at this point, most people would have made up their mind in the past, but exactly like he said, this is a very unique race. It's no secret that I was a very public supporter of the incumbent Secretary of State. She's done a fantastic job. I think everyone hopes to see the good work of that office continue. And so it's going to be a real toss-up to see where those undecided Republicans go. But the question is whether they will vote for a Democrat or if they will leave a blank space if their choice is not to vote for Diego. I think that's probably the nitty-gritty of where this is going to come down and shake out.
Arielle, the Democratic candidate in this race, Destiny Wells, has made no secret of going after those undecided Republican voters. Those Republican voters, even before all of what we have learned about Mr. Morales, whether it's the sexual misconduct allegations, whether it's the money, the campaign money that he spent on a new vehicle, everything else tied to his past, even before that came forth, Destiny Wells had been aggressively courting those Republican votes.
Absolutely. And she's still continuing to do that. And I think that's where Allie is right. There will be some Republicans that are really going to be not only completely undecided, but it is a toss-up between will they leave it blank or will they decide to vote for Destiny? And I think right now, when voters are looking at the long list of things that Diego Morales has done that are not representative of Hoosier values, I think they're going to make the decision to go with Destiny because they want someone that they can trust and that they know that has served. And everything that she's put out there has been true. So I think that when we're looking at this race specifically, Hoosiers want someone not only that they could trust in the role of Secretary of State, but someone who doesn't have this list long of allegations, someone who's lied about campaign funding and what they spent it on, the sexual assault allegations, military service. I mean, the list goes on. And I think that voters are going to look at that when they go to the ballot, and they're going to make the best choice of what they think is best for the state. And I think that person is going to be Destiny Wells for us.
One thing I wanted to just throw in, and both ladies, I agree with you both, but one thing you left out was there's a libertarian on the ballot, Jeff Moore. And Jeff Moore has not been your quote unquote typical libertarian. He's actually been a serious candidate, and he's actually been running ads. So I think there's a third choice here. They will skip the race, vote for Destiny Scott Wells, or I'd say even percentage of those could go to Jeff Moore. And then remember, libertarians will need about 10% to actually make it to have full party status.
And that would be a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. The debate on Monday, I think, will also be really telling. I mean, we're going to be able to see, Destiny and our libertarian candidate go head to head. I don't think Diego Morales is going to show up for that. I mean, he's refusing to do those public debates. So I think voters will have the opportunity to, ahead of early voting, make that decision.
Yeah, and the point about the libertarian candidate is a very good one, Abdul. That would be a big shift in the state to see him obtain 10% of the vote and things change in the elections going forward for the Libertarian Party.
At the same time, Abdul, could that actually help Diego Morales in the end if he's able to siphon some of those Republican votes who may not be comfortable voting for a Democrat? Could that actually help Diego despite everything?
There's always that possibility. I don't think it's very probable because to be honest with you, I think if you're still undecided by now, you're not going to vote for Diego Morales. To be brutally honest with you, because you're going to vote for Diego Morales, who made that decision a long time ago. Now I think it's between, like I said, Destiny Scott Wells, Jeff Moore, and people just doing none of the above. And if Destiny Scott Wells does win, there'll be almost sort of go back to Richard Murdoch back in 2012 with his rape comment in the debate. It was Republicans that got Joe Donnelly elected to the U.S. Senate. And I think it'll be Republicans. If Destiny Wells does win, it'll be Republicans who actually got her elected.
Let's move on to another statewide race, this for the U.S. Senate. And this one is very close, according to a couple of polls now. We had a previous poll taken by the campaign, or was commissioned, I believe, by the campaign of Tom McDermott, the Democratic candidate, that showed a tighter race than virtually anyone expects at this point with Republican Senator Todd Young. And Abdul, the IndyPolitics.org poll is showing the same thing. Why is this so hard for me to believe right now that this race is that close, according to the surveys?
Well, actually, if you think about it, Todd Young has the same issue that Diego Morales has, absent sexual harassment and getting fired from his job. There are a core group of Republicans, let's say about 25% who are undecided about Todd Young. And with Diego Morales, the number is about 30-something%. With Diego Morales, it's more the establishment Republicans. With Todd Young, it's more the MAGA Donald Trump Republicans. Because if you look at it, Todd Young is your perfect generic Republican U.S. senator. However, for the ideologues in the Hoosier state, that's just not enough. And so once again, I don't think they'll vote necessarily for Tom McDermott. I think they may just skip that race altogether or vote for James Stiniak. But it's those undecided Republicans that's making this race so close.
Allie, do you believe the race is that close right now?
It is very hard for me to believe that the race is that close. I think there could be some runoff for people responding to polls, also just overall declaring undecided, possibly as a result of that other statewide race that's going on. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see Todd Young win in a landslide. He has done a fantastic job over his last 6 years. There's no denying that. And honestly, if I could point to one person in the Indiana Republican Party who has done a good job of bridging the gap between the two kind of factions that Abdul just talked about, it is Todd Young. And so I truly believe that we're going to see him come out on top in a big way.
Arielle, the pollster, stipulated that even though this race was close, according to his survey of 600 likely voters, again, plus or minus 4-something%, that Mr. McDermott did have an uphill battle to fight the rest of the way in order to have a shot in this race. And a lot can happen in the last month of this campaign. Still, how much of a confidence boost, if at all, was that for Democrats that it may actually be a competitive race?
Yeah, I think we've thought that it's been a competitive race for a while now. I think one of the things that we have to remember is that, while Todd Young has had this position for 6 years now, the thing that's missing is that Democrats were able to bring in a lot of that infrastructure funding and a lot of that funding that really helped alleviate a lot of things coming out of the pandemic. And I think people will remember that. I mean, Democrats were the ones that brought those dollars to the state of Indiana. But also, too, we have to remember that Todd Young is also being run by some special interest things that are not really favorable of Hoosiers. I mean, he didn't agree to cap insulin. I think those are things that seniors, especially one of our highest voting populations, are going to remember when they go to the voting booth. And Tom McDermott is also taking the hand of courting Republicans and making sure that he's getting all of the votes across the state. So it's not just leaning towards one party. I think this is going to be a race to watch and to pay attention to. And Thomas McDermott could have a really strong chance of coming out on top.
Well, Abdul, just yesterday, the president jumped into an issue that is near and dear to Mr. McDermott's heart, and that is marijuana, announcing that he is pardoning all federal low-level marijuana possession charges. How much of a difference, if any, does something like that make in Indiana? Maybe that makes a difference nationally, where, of course, the fight over control of Congress, control of the Senate is going to be a big deal in a month. But here in Indiana, how much does that really matter?
I think it makes a difference around the edges, because that's fundamentally where a lot of these races will be won, also on the edges, so to speak. Because we also pulled the marijuana question, and it was once again like almost 80% of Hoosiers supported marijuana decriminalization or legalization for medicinal and/or recreational purposes. And so actually, it's funny because hopefully I have an answer for next week's program. I sent a request to the governor's office. What is the governor's position on this? Will the governor pardon, just simple possession marijuana charges like the president did? Because at the federal level, there really wasn't all that much, only like 6,000 or so people were convicted of simple possession. So the number isn't all that great, but it's more of a symbolic issue. But I do think, once again, it helps around the edges and helps those undecided voters. And if marijuana is your issue, then you got to stop. You got to put the pot down and actually go vote, which is another thing to think about too. But I do think it, like I said, it makes a difference on those margins.
Well, one local race here in Marion County where marijuana has been talked about, don't know how big of an issue it's going to be, but we'll see. And that's the Marion County Prosecutor's race. Abdul had a poll out this week that showed Ryan Mears, the Democratic incumbent, with a rather large lead over Republican Cindy Carrasco. Before I get into analysis, Abdul, what were the reasons for that large lead, according to your pollster?
Basically, it just depends on whether you thought crime was the big issue in Marion County. Cindy Carrasco leads with about half of those voters who thought crime was a big issue. Ryan Mears with other folks who thought crime was important, but not necessarily the number one related issue. Also, we have to keep in mind that Marion County is a Democratic county, plain and simple. And so Cindy will need some of those independent-minded Democrats to win. Now, what's also interesting, too, is that Mears' numbers haven't really changed all that much. He was about 47% when we looked at the race earlier this summer. He's about 50% now. But our sample size was a little bit smaller due to some technical polling reasons. So the margin of error was a little bit bigger. So I think Mears is probably the race is probably a little bit closer than our polling indicated. But Cindy Carrasco does still have a path to victory. She's got 30 days to get it done.
Arielle, this should give Democrats in Marion County some confidence. At the same time, though, you've got to make sure those voters turn out to the polls, and we don't see something happen like, the most famous instance in my mind is former Mayor Greg Ballard seemingly coming out of nowhere to win the mayor's race many, many years ago. How confident are Democrats right now that Ryan Mears is on the correct path?
We feel great about Ryan. I mean, he is a great prosecutor. He's doing the work. I mean, one of the issues, as Abdul has said, is the focus of addressing violent crime and keeping people safe. And he's been delivering on that. One of the things that a lot of people also don't know is that right now he has the highest criminal conviction rate that the office has seen in a decade. And so if you're someone who's looking at, addressing violent crime, I mean, he's definitely on his way in doing that. I think one of the other things too that I was looking over, some of the things that we've been seeing across the board in regards to this race, there's been a couple of debates, there's been some in-person things where people have been able to go and see both candidates and make a decision. And one of the things that I think that is important is that there's no wasting of resources right now when it comes to the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. And I don't think that we'll see that in the future. We don't want to see any women or their doctors being prosecuted for being able to seek an abortion. That's going to be a top issue here in this state. We've seen that out of SB 1. But then we're also looking at, we just talked about federal legislation when it comes to marijuana, decriminalizing it. And Prosecutor Mears is already doing that work. I think Marion County voters are going to want to make a decision on who can best serve in that way. And we're already getting that from Brian. And I think we have a clear path to victory. There's no denying that.
And we're having another televised debate here in the Marion County prosecutor's race that's going to air next Tuesday here on WRTV. How important, Allie, then is that debate, do you think, for Cindy Carrasco, given what this poll says? Let's stipulate it was a small sample size, as Abdul mentioned, but at the same time, it looks like she's got a bit of a climb in order to potentially win this race. So how important is a televised debate where she can be in front of voters, especially, and there are a lot of people who still haven't made up their minds this far out from the election?
Yeah, so earlier we talked about someone who I thought was not our strongest candidate on the Republican side. Contrastingly, I think Cindy Carrasco is one of the strongest candidates we have had in decades. She is an incredible leader. She's an incredible candidate, and Marion County needs it. I think there is absolutely no denying that there is a crime crisis in our city, and it is impacting families and businesses every single day. I've been out there, I've talked to them, I work here, I live here, I see it every day. Not to mention the fact that Ryan Mears received a vote of no confidence from his partners in the police force. That's a really scary thing to have happen to a sitting prosecutor. That did not ever happen with the last Democratic prosecutor, so it's not a political game. A vote of no confidence from your partners in the police when you're a prosecutor is a big deal. Maybe he does have a high prosecution rate, but that's also because he doesn't choose to prosecute everyone. That's not doing your job when you're a prosecutor. We can talk about the FedEx shooting where there was a red flag report sitting on his desk for 3 months that was never addressed. That's a big deal. There's big crime happening in Indianapolis. So to your question about the debate, Cindy Carrasco is fully prepared for that. She has had, like Arielle said, chances to talk and debate Ryan Mears already in public. It's going to be a big deal for her to be able to get in front of a larger audience so people can really hear her message. I will say that she has said time and time again, the abortion issue is not something she's going into this office to focus on. Of course, she's going into the office to focus on doing the job that the prosecutor is charged with. But I also will comment that there's not even a cause of action under the abortion law for prosecuting women who are seeking an abortion. So that's kind of a political talking point. And so I'm excited for the debate. I think it's going to be a big deal for Cindy, and people are going to really get to hear her message, which is that let's get to work and do our job so that we can do other things in the city of Indianapolis to move it forward. People here deserve that. They're not getting it right now.
7 p.m. Tuesday, October the 11th. That's when the debate in the Marion County prosecutor's race happens on WRTV. Afterward, we'll find out what the insiders think about it. Allie Bartlett, Arielle Brandy, Abdul Hakim Shabazz. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you.